Welcome to the second lecture in our Tree Stewards lecture series. We're excited to spend lunch with you guys. So we're just going to wait a few more minutes. Okay. Well, I'm thinking about
All right, Heather, there's no one else waiting to get in. So
all right.
I'm going to get started. I think we're good.
All right. Thanks, Nora. Thanks everyone for joining us today. Hi, I'm Heather Titanic. I am the community forester here at the Delaware Center for Horticulture. Joining us on the call is also Nora Melly, DCH's education manager, and the one who you're all here to see, Kim Eastlick, the public ally serving with the DCH. Kim has been here for the last few months serving through an AmeriCorps program called Public Allies, and they have been working primarily with me doing community forestry work, and they've also been helping out at our urban farm, helping to maintain the farm, grow, and donate produce. Kim has a background in history and has a Bachelor of Arts in History from the University of Albany, and in their spare time they enjoy baking, making art, and spending time with animals. Before I hand it over to Kim, I just want to cover a few housekeeping items. So we have a chat feature in the Zoom today. So if you want to drop any comments or questions in the chat feature, we'll be sure to answer those at the end. And if you could all please mute yourself. I see everyone's muted, so that's great. And just make sure to stay muted through the entirety of the presentation. You probably saw a notification, but this lecture is being recorded. And so if you missed it, or if you want to rewatch it, we will have that available to you. And without further ado, Kim, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Hold on, I will share my screen. All righty. Okay. Hi, everyone. I thank you so much for joining today. I'm, as Heather said, I'm Kim Eastlick, a public ally serving at the DCH. Today's lecture centers around tree biology and trees in the environment. So let's get started. So in case you missed the previous lecture, this is a review of what's considered a tree. To better understand the importance of trees, we can start at a base level of tree knowledge. So what exactly are trees? They're considered woody plants that have one perennial stem, a trunk, or a trunk at least 3 inches in diameter at a point 4.5 feet above the ground, a mature height of at least 13 feet, as well as primary and secondary growth. So to start with tree biology, I thought we would begin from the ground up, starting with roots and their primary functions to trees. Roots serve 4 functions for trees: anchorage, storage, absorption, and conduction of water and nutrients. And within the root system, there are different types of roots that all play a different role to support the tree. The root collar or root flare and buttress roots work to anchor the tree, providing it with stability. And the root collar is the part of the tree's trunk where it joins the main stem of the tree. The collar requires the movement of oxygen and carbon dioxide in and out of the phloem, which is in the inner bark, to survive. So if you plant your tree too deep or add too much soil or mulch on the root collar, it can inhibit this gas exchange and kill phloem cells, interfering with the downward movement of food to the roots. Eventually, this can lead to root dieback, reduced water uptake, and possibly tree death. And then the buttress or structural roots are wood, same as the trunk. And these roots at the trunk base help support the tree and also equalize mechanical stress. Along with the root collar and buttress roots, there are also fine absorbing roots and root hairs. Fine roots are responsible for the absorption of mineral nutrients and water, and root hairs similarly absorb water and nutrients from soil. Root hairs are long, tubular, shaped outgrowths from the root epidermal cells. because they vastly increase the root surface area and effectively increase root diameter. Root hairs are generally thought to aid plants in nutrient acquisition, anchorage, and microbe interactions. It's also important to understand the relationship that other organisms can have with tree roots. That way you're able to know what to look out for to keep your trees healthy. The rhizosphere is the underground area adjacent to plant roots where soil and roots are interacting. It's a chemically and biologically active area where the soil supports root growth, various insects and fungi. And as you can see from the photo to the left, tree roots are extremely opportunistic and will adapt to better reach available water and nutrients. This direct relationship between roots and fungi is known as mycorrhizae. The fungi will absorb water and nutrients from soil. This particular fungus is a morsel mushroom on the right, an edible mushroom that will start appearing in woodlands now that we're entering the spring season, and they're often associated with tulip poplars and ash trees. Plant roots are often hospitable sites for the fungi to anchor and produce their threads, creating an underground fungal network. The roots provide essential nutrients for the growth of the fungi, and in return, the large mass of fungi acts as a virtual root system for the plants, increasing the amount of water and nutrients that the tree may obtain from the surrounding soil. To protect from damage and possible infection, trees use their bark kind of somewhat as a shield. The bark for trees acts as a protective outer layer, which works to retain moisture, exchange gas, provide insulation, and is constantly renewing. And to take a look at the biology of the inside of the tree, as I mentioned, the bark is the outer protective layer. And then next we have the phloem, which takes the sugars produced from photosynthesis in the leaves to transport throughout the rest of the tree. And this is also the part of the tree that you're tapping into when you're tapping for syrup. Growth within the vascular system is within the cambium. It produces two types of cells, the xylem to the inside or the interior of the trunk, and produces phloem to the inside of the bark. Heartwood, which you can see is the center portion, is kind of the central pillar for the tree. And xylem are the wood cells within the stem, and the wood eventually dies off to become the hardwood, to then become the protective structure and stores carbon. The xylem also takes water and nutrients from the roots and draws them up to be used in the nursery. And also lastly, this image to the right is a damaged tree from a car crash. Inside, you're able to see the xylem as the car went through the first 3 layers of the tree. And as you can imagine, since the entire protective layer was taken off, it's going to be quite hard for the tree to defend itself against infection or any other external harm that bark can typically protect. So next we have the buds of the tree. And during winter, leaves and flowers of many plants rest dormant as buds under protective scales wait for their cues to emerge. Sometimes the scales are covered in fine hairs for extra protection. Some buds are naked, meaning they also have no scales. And when buds are found at the end of the branch, they're called terminal buds. When found at the leaf axils, they're called axillary buds. Some buds can also appear on other parts of the plant, like the roots or the trunk. So to show a more formal photo, you're able to see the anatomy of this twig and where the buds are found at the end of the branch. They're called terminal buds. And when found at the leaf axils within this photo, they're called axillary or lateral buds. And in woody plants, these buds signal the end of dormancy and the start of spring growth. Now to continue moving up the tree, we have the trunk and the branches. So the branch bark ridge is this area of the raised strip of bark where the growth of the parent stem and adjoining branch push back into the ridge. The branch collar is created by overlapping vascular tissues from the branch and the trunk, and the overlapping wood at the branch collar makes the branch union stronger for the tree. And under this branch collar is the branch protection zone, which are overlapping tissues that work to chemically and physically modify tissue within the parent branch of the within the parent branch at the base of the smaller branch, which works to slow the spread of discoloration and decay into the parent branch. The primary functions of the trunk and branches are to provide stability, storage of water, nutrients, and carbon, and transportation of water and nutrients throughout the vascular system, the xylem and phloem. Branches are the structure of the tree which support leaves, flowers, and buds or other overlapping wood at the branch collar, making the branch union strong. Also, for a strong branch union, it must be considered a 2-to-1 ratio of the stem to the branch, basically just meaning so the branch should be about half the size of the trunk. And you can see within these images, I've kind of highlighted the ratio that you're looking for. And at the end of these branches, we have leaves. Leaves' primary function is to produce food for the tree through photosynthesis. The main functions that are associated with the leaves of trees are photosynthesis. Sunlight is converted to chemical energy and in the form of carbs. Transportation, water loss in the form of water vapor, creating pressure gradient. The waxy cuticle on the outer surface, which minimizes drying out for the tree. And the stomata, they're small openings in the leaf surface that control water loss as well as gas exchange. And to go into a bit more depth on photosynthesis, as well as kind of provide a general review, plants take in water, carbon dioxide, and sunlight. The water is then transformed into oxygen, carbon into glucose or sugar, and oxygen is released into the air, storing energy in glucose molecules. The diagram on the right demonstrates the process of photosynthesis for the leaf. You're able to see the intake of carbon dioxide, oxygen, and sunlight, and the release of glucose. Additionally, chloroplasts store the energy of sunlight and light-absorbing pigment within the chloroplast, known as chlorophyll. And during photosynthesis, chlorophyll absorbs energy from blue and red light waves and reflects green light waves, which is what makes a plant appear green. So the flowers and the fruit that you see on trees actually often serve more than an aesthetic purpose. Flowers encourage insects to pollinate flowers, fertilize flower embryo, and create seed, which is essentially just the plant attempting to pass on its genetics, while fruit works to reproduce and provide a source of food to animals. And also on the topic of creating seed, there are several methods that trees use to move their seed throughout the environment. The first is gravity. It's the simplest way that trees disperse their seeds, and where they can kind of just drop to the ground, also through wind. And what's interesting about this method is that various species of trees, such as ash, field maples, and hornbeams, have what's known as helicopter seeds, where they're kind of able to just auto-rotate and being moved by the wind. Also animals, another common way that seeds are moved is through furry friends. So for example, oaks utilize the storing behavior of squirrels and jays as they bury acorns to store throughout the winter. And kind of when some are inevitably forgotten, new trees will sprout. Also through water, along with animals, most trees will rely on water to move their seeds. For example, the seeds of both willow and alder trees are able to float. However, water is an advantageous option to air, as traveling by water allows for the life of the seed to be extended. If kept cool and moist, they can stay fresh for a lot longer. In fact, weeping willow seeds spread by water can last for about a month, whereas normally their viability begins to drop after 10 days. And lastly, by force. In contrast to other methods of seed dispersal, by force is not as common of a method. So for an example, yellow jewelweed, they're also known as touch-me-nots. And as it grows, it's filled with water. And as it dries out, tension builds. And then when lightly touched, whether it be by an animal or a person, it explodes and it ejects its seeds. Trees and other greenery have adapted to spread their genetics in really interesting ways. So after discussing the ways that trees grow and thrive, it's important to note how trees can benefit us collectively, also known as forests. They provide clean water, and more than half of US drinking water is derived from forests. They clean our air, provide habitats for animals. More than 5 million species of animals depend on forests for survival. They help us combat climate change, as well as allowing us to use less energy. And to continue to demonstrate the importance of forests, here are a few fun forest facts. America's forests sequester 866 million tons of carbon a year, which is about 16% of US annual emissions. Research has also found that approximately a third of the world's 105 largest cities obtain a significant portion of their drinking water from protected areas, and that well-managed natural forests provide benefits to urban populations in terms of high-quality drinking water. Also, more than 25% of the medicines we use originate in rainforest plants, yet only about 1% of rainforest plants have been studied for medicinal purposes. Also, forests are home to over 80% of land animals and plants and cover 31% of the world's total land area. So the statistics on the last slide work to demonstrate the overall importance of forests. However, what we may not think of in our definition of forests is urban forestry. Urban forestry work has become increasingly important in combating the effects of living in cities. It can be defined as the management of naturally occurring and planted trees and associated plants in urban areas. And I use this definition from the ISA because they're a nonprofit organization that sets international standards for tree management and care. Additionally, urban forestry works to counteract the urban heat island effect, which occurs when cities replace natural land cover with dense concentrations of pavement, buildings, and other surfaces that absorb and retain heat. Sorry, the light went off in this room. This effect increases energy costs, air pollution levels, and heat-related illness and mortality. Therefore, maintaining our current forests has become increasingly crucial, even in cities, or especially in cities. The importance of urban trees also is indicative of the extra care and attention they may need. So to best plant or care for urban trees, you'll want to ensure that they have as much space as possible. You're going to provide the tree with below and above ground space. And we'll also discuss this more in depth in the next part of the lecture series. You also want to call utilities to make sure you're not going to be digging in the way of any utility lines. Plant trees if you have the property to do so. You're not only benefiting yourself, but you're providing benefits to the city and your direct community. Urban trees also need more regular watering. Barriers or borders to ensure protection from potential root damage. And also just plant the best recommended species for the area that you're working with. Native species are more adaptable. So thank you all so much for attending. Here's the contact info for me as well as Heather. You can feel free to reach out with any questions you might have in the near future. We'd also like to encourage you to visit the DCH, which is located in Trolley Square next to the Brandywine Creek Park. And if you're able to, my final lecture on our Tree Steward series, which is focused on proper planting and maintenance of trees, is on April 5th. Additionally, we have our food cycle series beginning in May, where the first lecture is an introduction to community composting. Along with educational lectures, the DCH also hosts a variety of other events throughout the year that includes a pop-up beer garden, learning from great gardens, field trips, where you're able to tour and learn more about various gardens throughout Delaware and surrounding states, and Dance for Plants. And admission to all of these events mentioned are also discounted with a DCH membership. And lastly, I just wanted to pose a few general questions to the audience, in addition to any other questions anyone might have, as a way to kind of facilitate our discussion. So how do the individual components of the tree, such as the roots, bark, branches, work together to provide ecological services? And what is something new that you learned today about a tree, or today about tree anatomy and trees in the environment?
Thanks, Kim. That was great. And thank you all again for attending. We can start answering questions now. I see a few of you have posted in the chat. So first, Anita is asking what currently flowering trees are great to plant in a lawn area in Kennett County, Delaware. It seems like she's asking specifically about native trees. Kim, do you have any thoughts on that?
Any current flowering trees? I know serviceberries and redbuds, they're both native to Delaware, right? And they're great flowering trees that are relatively small. So that could be what you're looking for your lawn, or if you were looking for something larger. Do you have a suggestion for like a larger flowering tree, Heather?
Yeah, I think serviceberries and redbuds are good. They're not quite flowering yet. The buds are just starting to open, but I think in terms of natives, they're some of the earliest. Some magnolias are starting to flower, not the native ones yet, but they're larger flowering trees. And another non-native, but a lot of ornamental cherries are starting to flower, and we see those, we're seeing a lot of those in Wilmington, blooming in Trolley Square especially.
Yeah, someone also had a question about the tree for the car, where the car crash had hit the tree. I don't believe that tree would be able to survive. I would definitely want a more expert opinion on that, but just looking at it, and since it kind of took the first 3 layers of the tree out with it, it would be really hard for the tree to kind of be able to defend itself against infections or any other harm. So I feel like it's kind of unlikely that that tree would be able to survive.
Yeah, I agree with you there, Kim. Just, going back to the vascular system that you were talking about, that section of the bark is just completely devoid of any way to transport water and nutrients up and down throughout the tree from the roots to the leaves and vice versa. I don't believe that kind of car crash would immediately kill the tree and pose it as an immediate hazard, but I think, a removal and replacement in the near future is what I would recommend. Yeah. All right, we have another question that came in from Valerie. What non-native tree does one normally find at nurseries or large box stores that would be best avoided for planting in Delaware? And now the light in my room went off. Yeah, right off the bat, calorie pears are I still see them in nursery catalogs. They're flowering right now. They have large white blooms of flowers, but they are a known invasive tree. They have been known to escape cultivation and escape urban and landscape plantings, and they're starting to invade our native ecosystems, and they are banned in the nursery trade in a few states. The northern states like Maine and Vermont are usually quicker to ban invasive species. Delaware, I don't believe, is quite at that point yet, but they're on a lot of not recommended to plant lists. But I do still unfortunately see calorie pears being sold and marketed as a nice ornamental tree, which we know that we have better alternatives to plant here in Delaware.
Also, any tree planting events coming up? Besides our Arbor Day activities, do we have any specific tree planting events coming up in the near future?
We do have some coming up, more in-house. So we have our Branches to Chances Return to Work program going on right now, and we're going to be doing a tree planting at Mount Zion, which is a historic Black cemetery just outside of Wilmington in Newcastle County. And we'll be doing a planting there with the Branches to Chances participants more as kind of a hands-on on-site training. We are also going to be having a tree giveaway called Trees for People in the Tri-Parks area, which is south of Wilmington, kind of in the Dunleith area. So not quite a planting event, more of a pickup / giveaway event. But if you're asking about volunteer opportunities, that is an upcoming opportunity that we would have for volunteers in terms of trees. And Mac has more of a comment saying, while we learned about the phloem in school, it was cool to be reminded of it as other components of tree anatomy. Yeah, Mac, I agree. I think a lot of people kind of forget the term xylem and phloem. You don't use them every day. You don't think about them a lot. But I like to think of them as, like Kim mentioned, the maple syrup, because it is that sugary substance that is benefiting the trees. You know, everybody needs sugar, needs carbohydrates to live for energy, plants and animals alike. And so I think it's really interesting just to think about the ways that plants use them, and then the way that we also tap into trees to get those nutrients. So I think it's really interesting too. If anyone else has any questions, you can feel free to drop them in the chat. If you want to ask them, you can also feel free to unmute yourself. Or if you have any responses to Kim's discussion questions of how the individual components of a tree work to provide ecological services. Kim, what do you think about that? What have you learned in creating this presentation about the ecological services of the individual parts of a tree?
Yeah, I mean, from what we've learned, I feel like the different components of the tree are really similar to a human body. You have all of these different things interacting that work together to be able to provide the system with water and nutrients. So especially with like roots, they're working to provide the tree with water and food and send that up throughout the tree. So that way the tree is able to provide the ecological services that they're meant to.
Yeah. Yeah. I think since we're coming out of winter, I definitely appreciate more the branch form and structure, which is more, you know, related to the branches, that seeing all the birds' nests and the squirrels' nests and the leaves and everything that gets caught up in the branches, and just seeing how just the physical presence of the tree being there is supporting other things in the ecosystem, like squirrels and our non-migratory birds. So definitely looking forward to having more birds come back as the weather warms up, and, you know, hearing more bird song.
I've also included my email in the chat, and I can go back to this last slide as well with our contact information. I put my email and Heather's email is up there as well. If you have any further questions or future questions, you can feel free to send us both an email.
Yeah, and if there's no other questions, we can end a minute or two early. As we mentioned, these lectures are being recorded, so if you want to reference them, we will have the recordings and they should be up on our YouTube channel. Yeah, all right, well, I guess we'll end it here. So thank you everyone for coming. I hope you had a nice lunch and enjoyed something about trees. And we hope to see you next time in the third part of this lecture series.
Thank you everyone
Thank
for
you.
attending.